Hey, Adriana. Thank you for joining me. Really happy to be speaking with you. Welcome to Film and Impact.
Thank you so much, Safrini. It's really a meet you and really excited to have this conversation with you.
So just start off, tell me a bit about how you got into filmmaking.
Yeah, so that's well, it's a different story in a way that I didn't actually went to film school. I remember that I moved from Mexico to Brazil because I was born in Brazil, but I was raised in Mexico, and a Mexican father, a Brazilian mother. So I went back to Brazil when I was like 17, decided to study there. And, I think it's part of like having maybe a conservative point of view of family that had the idea that artists are not able to support financially themselves. So I had a pressure of like, if you're gonna be 18, you have to be able to pay your bills. And so I searched for a career that kind of like gave me that advantage. So I ended up doing advertising in São Paulo, which I hated from the first semester. It was something that I had no passion about whatsoever. But then I met some interesting people while I was doing university in the first semester, not in the area. They were like journalists and other people from other areas. And we formed a film collective called Cinefusão. And, we were like this, at the moment, we were like 8 people, people who were trying to find a way to make films or think about films in a collective way. So when I formed this collective, we started doing cine clubs. And it was really interesting because we did it in a really popular street in São Paulo called Augusta Street. And it's a really crazy street. You can imagine like maybe Hollywood Boulevard, but even crazier 10 times. So a lot of like bars and nightclubs and, this really raw part of downtown city. So we had the cine clubs with these films that we chose, to discuss films in a way to want to make a film or trying to think, what this film talked to us in a way of society and in complexities and discussion and even like rupture, because some of the people that were part of the collective, they did actually went to like study courses, and they found that they were really being taught how to think in a really specific kind of way or in specific kind of references, and we were interested in like just exploring what else was there and having a discussion not in the academic part only, but also like in society or in a more collective way. So in these cineclubs we will choose films, and suddenly it was open to everybody. So we had public, like an immigrant family, students, people who just were like walking down the street and they saw poster about a cineclub and just went up. It's a street that it's really common because of prostitutes. So we had a really faithful visitor who was this 56-year prostitute that came to all the cine clubs and just like to comment about them. So we were really learning films, also discussing these films with other people, people
Wow.
from society. And that makes us question, why making films, why we wanted to make films with these references. So I guess I learned why I wanted to make films from that perspective, not just being a student from the academy. Not that I don't admire that. I think I'm getting older. I think I do feel the necessity of an academic profile also. I think it's really enrichful. But for me, it was interesting to start to make films from that perspective. So we were doing exercise as a laboratory from the collective, where we had these dogmas or these exercises that pushed us, to make these videos, films that we would discuss between ourselves in a really independent way, experimental way. And we had this principle of always trying to challenge norms. So even challenging norms of language, in cinematographic language. So how can we exercise to make these ruptures, and push ourselves with the limitations we had, because all of us were people like, we had no money, we had no resources, we had no means of production, we had no support whatsoever. We did only have ourselves. So I remember, I think I was the only one in the collective that I actually had a job at the moment. And I remember that I got fired and I got the money from my from my last payroll, because they pay you
Weekly?
yeah, the leave bill, right? And I got the money and I said, well, I'm gonna buy some equipment with this and then we can do our films. And that's what happened. I remember that we went all together to the equipment store in downtown São Paulo, and like, what do we need to make like the minimum? And so we bought a tripod, a camera, and that's how we started to make, this like, it was the first like experimental domestic films. But from that laboratory, I remember came my first short film that's called Ferroada, Bite in English. I don't know if you got the chance to see it, but it was based on this author writer named Tico, who was also a grave digger. So it was a really interesting character with this two profiling of himself, being a writer and also working in a cemetery. And so that first film, which I'm really proud of, and it was a really special project, came from an exercise from that collective. So that's how I started. That's your question.
That's pretty amazing. That's a pretty amazing story. I love that film, by the way. So basically, you all started just talking about films and talking about, the importance of making films and why you need to make films, but you were not actually making films at that moment, like in the beginning in the Cine Club. You were not making films yet.
Yeah, actually, like I wasn't. I was part of this collective that some of them, they already were making some films, like in school, in film school. Okay. Danilo, Bruno, they are friends that I have till today, and we're really collaborators. I'm actually making a feature film, Issue and the Universe. I'm making it with Danilo. Danilo's the editor, and he was the first. I mean, he was from the collective. So yeah, somehow this connections and it kept built till today. And I think we were also interested in having a really political and social discussion in this film. So we were not just interested in like making short films. We wanted to have a really political discussion about why making these films, or what do we need to tell in these films. It was really a quest of search and understanding that I think all of us, I mean, at least the collective that remained till the last years, that we shared in common.
So I've seen Bite, I've seen Flaca, the Bony Lady, and I've also seen a sample of Issue and Universe. And I'm really excited about this film. I can't wait to see it when it's done. What is your process like when you decide to make a film? Because they're so singular, these films, and the issues that you sort of tackle in each of these films. How do you choose the film, and what's your process?
Yeah, in this case, I mean, these films that I at least I have a creative process in them. They all, I think, part, and I think all of my films in the future are being part of that. They're all like a search, they're a really personal quest of even questioning ourselves, in understanding some things in life. I think finding ourselves in life, I think my artistic expression is really a search of something. And I think in that search of something, you have to be really related to it for you to actually explore that. So in the case of Bite, for instance, I was really drawn to the literature of this character because I had the chance to, it started just like I saw this news. It was just like an article of this grave digger who wrote stories, but it was kind of like an exotic kind of, even it seemed like it was like a horror story sort of way. But I went out to check the book that he wrote, and when I read the book and these short stories, I was really amazed, and something like really called to me, and I just decided to write him an email and wanted to meet him. And then when I met him, I think it was just like love at first sight, and he became a really true friend of mine. But like searching, I think, a passion of life through this character made this film. And when I came to La Flaca, it was also like part of a research that I've been doing for many years in Mexico, which is understanding faith and resistance in a world that, religion can sometimes be so oppressive, and a freedom also. So this dialectical relationship, in religion with society, is something that I've been really interested in exploring and understanding. and maybe even finding myself, you know, trying to believe in something. So this other character, Areli, she also like drawn us to understand and actually like how important it is to portray these complexities, you know, of characters, and mostly deconstruct, you know, an imaginary that we have, or deconstruct a preconception that we have, you know, because we have been thought about an idea by mainstream or by, you know, by mostly societies. So in the case of Bite, Ferroada, I wanted to portray this humble man as someone that he was really an anarchist, and he had a really political point of view of life and death. So I think I needed to honor that. You know, those are the characters that I'm really interested in people listening to them, I believe. So with Areli, which is the character of the Bony Lady, La Flaca, for me, she's also a character that she needs to be heard, because she represents so much, you know, as an immigrant here in the US, and a transgender woman, and also, you know, becoming a leader of this community in Queens, New York, and what she represents to this big community. And having someone like a transgender woman being a leader of a Mexican Latino community, for me, it's something amazing already, especially in our religious movements. So yeah, and in the case of Issue in the Universe, which in this case, Thiago, my partner, he's a director, and I've been producing it. It's the same thing. I mean, we need to not give voice, because they do have a voice, but we need to like bring these stories so people can understand that there's way more complexities, that there's way more things to understand and to see, and to deconstruct about themselves, even ourselves as creators. You know, we deconstructed so much learning about these characters, and making these films. I think it's a way of honoring their courage and honoring what they represent, you know, to us, and what we think they can represent to others.
What has been the public like reception and feedback from Flaca?
It's really interesting, because I remember it premiered, the world premiere was in Switzerland, like in Freiburg, this really European city. And I got the chance to be there, and they told me that they selected that film because the city is really Catholic. So they thought it was interesting to show a film that, you know, it would bring a discussion about that. So the film already started like that, you know, to make people see that, you know, there are really complexities about, you know, some certain things, especially this religion, because I think La Flaca is actually questioning the hegemonic power of Catholic Church, and I think it's something that we need to discuss anyway. And I think the debate can be rich in so many ways. And I was really afraid to show, not afraid, but I was insecure to show it in Mexico, and I was able to be there as well. And you know, because in Mexico, most of people, they do think that Santa Muerte, it's a religious movie related to the devil, or it's something devilish, and the Catholic Church totally has a prejudice about them. You know, they totally deny them in their country. So it was interesting to see, you know, like, oh, I didn't know that, you know, that they actually had this Catholic influences. They have these rosaries. So it's not that it's so different, or they do something that is, you know, like devilish or something, but they do have concepts that they totally diversify from the Catholic Church, which is they attend to a saint that does not discriminate them, and period, you know. So death, death represents something that it cannot discriminate, because it's welcome to everyone. It's going to happen to everyone. But I think it also represents, you know, I think that it's really clear that why is this movement growing so much? And it's because, you know, society has been so discriminating in so many ways, you know, like LGBTQ community, and, you know, immigrant and working people and prostitutes, you know, sex workers. So these people that are like the renegades, you know, you know, they live in the outskirts of our society mentality. So they see in this saint someone who empowers them and embraces them. And I think we need to ask, you know, then why is it growing so much? It's because we have so much discrimination on the other end. So, but you know, in so many things. I mean, I think it's also something that I've been always really interested about. You know, the forms of the representations of faith and religious movements. I'm really interested in that, and I think death is something. You know, how we represent death in our lives. How are we afraid and curious about them? I think as being a Mexican, it's quite common, but. So yeah, so I think it's part of my research. Maybe it's part of, you know, it's somehow it's representing our films, you know, I guess this approach, this curiosity.
And I think it's definitely a film that does generate, you know, discussion on these topics, because it is, it deals with so many different questions and issues. There is a question of religion, there's a question of acceptance, there's a question of gender, there's a question of leadership. There's so many things inside of this film. It has been seen, it has been in over 100 festivals around the world.
Yeah, that was a really good surprise. And I think mostly because we had a really good support, I must say. We had this amazing distributor called Kino Rebelde, which is this Argentinian badass for distribution in film festivals, Maria Vera. She's like she brought this film alive in that way. So that helped a lot, you know, when you have support of someone, and she's really interested in bringing these emergent voices to the industry and to be known. But in that sense, I think what makes us more proud of it is that we were able to show this film in places where this discussion is even more important, you know, like Poland and Tunisia, Russia. Even in Russia, I mean, it's screening Message to Men, which is like a big festival. And, you know, in these countries where the LGBT community is completely denied, and, you know, it's against, you know, the whole country is against them. And so to show this film, you know, I think it's important to people to be related to it and see, you know, representations, you know, of these communities in a way, and in really different perspectives, you know, for instance, in a community from Queens, there are immigrants. So I think that was really powerful. I think that's, you know, that's what strikes us the most. It's screening China also, and it had to be like a secret screening because it couldn't be even announced. You couldn't have like the place announced in the internet because that could be of trouble somehow. So it's a sad part of it, but I think it was really powerful to have these films present also in this part of the world.
And right now, you're working on your feature documentary issue on the universe, which addresses also issues. You address this topic of religion also, and you're doing a co-production with Nigeria, right? With a Nigerian producer. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Sure. Actually, this film it's based on this character, which is Professor King, and he's a Nigerian who moved to Brazil in the 80s, and he has this really strong relationship between Brazil and Nigeria. He brought his religion to Brazil in a way, and he built this huge community and this huge cultural exchange. So actually, he's the one who wanted to make a film about his community. And he was working with this photographer, which is a friend of ours, of me, Thiago, who went to Mexico and did this research with us about Santa Muerte in Mexico. And the curious thing is that the Santa Muerte religious movement in Mexico is really related, or has a really strong relationship with like the Orishas, with Santeria. So it's really common to be a devotee of Santa Muerte and also be a devotee of Santeria in Mexico. So we were already in contact with, you know, with this world, with the Orishas and these African deities, you know, even if it's different influences, you know, when we're talking about Mexico. So we were already, you know, doing a research on that. And this photographer, he suddenly was starting to film this Nigerian character because he was part of like this group that was following him. And he told him, you know what, you should call Thiago and Adriana because they've been doing this work, you know, before, and they've already made this film that is really similar, you know, about this other religious movement and trying to make another different portrait of it. So Thiago was the one who met him before, and they really connected. I think it was like a strong connection since the beginning, and he truly like trusted that Thiago was gonna be able to share the story, you know. And we've been doing it like since 2017. We've been doing it like slowly, carefully, because it is a really complex project, you know, in so many ways. We're dealing with, you know, racial issues as well, because we cannot talk about how this community is struggling to prove, you know, their God issue is not the devil, as is seen in Brazil, without talking about racial issues and, you know, systemic racism, and also how religious freedom is under attack in a country like Brazil, where suddenly, you know, a far-right government took place, and there, you know, these attacks to African religious movement have been growing so badly. So what it was before, you know, like a portrait of this community, it suddenly become really political, because we thought it would be important. You know, we cannot talk about this community living in Brazil without talking about these issues as well. And the most crucial thing, I think, is it's talking about the journey of this character, you know, because he's trying to really tell another story of his community and prove, you know, that his religion is not primitive, and try to make this another idea of what are, you know, of what his religion is and what his community is. So we've been working really closely to him, and it's the same process, I guess, you know, to really understand what we're gonna tell, and, you know, bring, you know, honor this resistance that we've been witnessing, you know, with this community. But we're really excited, yeah, to be able to finish it. We've been struggling with having funding for the post-production. We're still in the editing room, you know, figuring out exactly, you know, what the structure of the film is, because it's so complex and it has so many narratives, you know, to approach. So it's been the most challenging project so far.
Did you have any, were there any moments that were sensitive to film, or where you felt like you guys were in danger, or you felt something like threatened from the outside based on the resistance of like the population to accept the religion that of the people that you were filming?
Like, so far, no. I mean, not in danger. I mean, now with this film that we're in Brazil, issue in the universe, just because of how this situation in Brazil got so critical, you know, with this government that actually embraces, you know, this polarization and this fight against, you know, this community. So we do feel afraid of maybe some retaliation of some part when this film comes out. Mm-hmm. And we do talk about that a lot, like with the character and the community. And curiously enough, they're not afraid. Like, they're not afraid as we are, you know. Like, sometimes we're afraid like they're gonna come and look for us, you know, because we're maybe showing something that they can feel offended, you know. I'm talking about mostly the evangelical church, someone from that part. Because they're doing a lot of damage in Brazil in so many ways. I'm not saying that the evangelical church is bad in a way. I'm saying like people in power who are using that for their benefit, you know, and discriminating, you know, the others. I'm talking about mostly those. But it's curious to see like the community, when we talk about this with Professor King, which is the main character, he doesn't care. He's like, no, like, for me, you can show even more, like show everything. And who wants to talk about it, will talk bad about it anyways. And who wants to embrace it, you know, will embrace it. And it's curious because we're always discussing, and when we're showing this film, like for instance, like in the industry, or even, you know, in pitching sessions and stuff, people do question us, you know, like question our morals and ethics, because I do think it's a moment to question that in so many ways. And we share that concern with him, with Professor King. And it's curious to hear from a Nigerian man to say, like, are you concerned about that? You know, what matters is the story that you're telling. And he told us a very precise phrase, like, you can't expect everyone to approve you or to like what you're doing. You can't expect that. So if you're expecting that, just like, forget it, you know, just relax, it's not gonna happen. And I think that's something that he's already used to it, you know. But I think, you know, what matters the most is that this community feels safe, you know, with this film. Yeah.
So you recently moved from Brazil to Los Angeles. What has the shift been like for you between like these two environments?
It's curious you asking me that because I think I moved from Brazil mostly of a feeling of not belonging anymore. And I remember when I moved from Mexico to Brazil, I was looking forward to like belong to this country that for me it was like a free, open-minded country. You know, how you know I didn't have the conception that Brazil could be like a conservative country in any ways. But then throughout the years, I mean, it just got harder and harder. I mean, I remember 2016. I think it began in 2014, actually, that people were like, commonly people wouldn't be politically positioned, you know, in Brazil. It's not something that it's so common, for instance, like in Argentina or even in Mexico, you know, when you have like political history of your country so clearly, you know, in your mind. And in Brazil, I didn't feel that, you know, that connection so clearly, because it is a country that still struggles to understand its identity and to actually understand its history, because it has been so wiped out through this, you know, through colonization and through so many things. But I think it just got complicated, you know. It's a marvelous country where people are fighting so much for freedom and for their voices and you know, for revolution in so many ways.
Yeah.
But it got complicated. So I felt a need to belong, you know, to feel like I'm belonging again. And in a way I started to go back to Mexico, you know, and to look for those roots. And I'm not saying in Mexico things are really easier. It's not. It's really complicated there as well, especially if you're a woman. But I remember like when I came to LA for a screening of a film, I was still living in Brazil, and I was amazed of like, am I really in the US? Because it feels like I'm somewhere in between. I mean, I was walking through some neighborhoods and people weren't even talking English, you know. And I think there's a thing being here that kind of brought me closer to hometown, you know, to Mexico and being a Mexican, and to like feel of belonging. So what I would say to you is that like being an immigrant here in the US somehow made me feel more Mexican than ever. And I'm feeling connected with a really interesting community, you know, of immigrants, Latin, you know, native immigrants that are fighting for that identity as well, and to feel identified here, you know, in a land where it was already ours since the beginning. You know, this part was Mexico before. So it's been an interesting process, and I've been trying to understand, you know, because when I moved here exactly a year ago, I didn't expect for a global pandemic to hit, and then like, you know, this adaptation like kind of got stuck. But even though I'm trying to understand it through this process, and for me, it's been interesting, you know, moving from a place where I was feeling so saturated with so much sorrow and feeling lost. And here, even though things seem to be getting complicated as well, I mean, we have a really decisive year with the election in November, but let's see what's going to happen. But in a way, it's beautiful to see, you know, immigrants fighting, you know, to rebuild this country. And I'm looking forward to that.
Nice. I want to come back to the making films. There's a question that always comes up for, you know, emerging filmmakers and people who are just starting out, and that's about funding your film. How did you fund your films, and how do you do it today?
It's been a struggle from the beginning, and I think when we're trying to make films, that it's not, you know, sometimes we have to understand that you do have to maybe play the game for you to be able to live by doing this. Because I think it's the hardest thing is like for you to be able to live, you know, being able to pay the bills doing cinema. That's the hardest thing, because I was never able to do that in a way. And I know that everyone who I work with always struggle with that, especially in Brazil. So I always had a struggle. I mean, in my first short film, Ferroada, it got a small public fund for a short film, and I ended up doing a feature film with that, a small amount. And so it was already like crazy, and I was able to do it, but sometimes we ended up not waiting for that fund. I mean, with La Flaca, we didn't wait. We were trying to think about making like a crowdfunding. But then, you know, sometimes when a story calls you, you have to make that decision where you just go or you wait for the right timing for it. And sometimes, you know, you need to make that decision really wisely, because sometimes it turns differently to what you expect. But I just know that learning to be able to do these films in a possible way, you do have to have support, at least of someone, you know, because if you're doing films by yourself and you isolate yourself, it's gonna get harder. But I think it's important to have collaboration. So all these films were possible because of true collaboration of people who believe in this project the same as you. And if it's a project that you are the one conceiving it, you know, is your artistic vision or is your storytelling, you have to be able to share that really in a really true way with the people around you, because then it's easier for you to feel supported, and somehow it can bring you connections, you know, and be able to make that film possible. And yeah, I mean, I would say that's difficult. That's the most hardest part. But sometimes, yeah, sometimes we just like make it happen, you know. Sometimes we don't want to wait for someone to validate us and tell us that now we're able to have a film. Sometimes we just like me do a freelance and we use the money for that. And I don't think that's ideal, because I do want to feel that if I'm doing a project and I have collaborators with me, I do want to feel that it's paid fairly, because even if it's a passion project, I do believe that making film, it's a work, you know, it's a job for someone. So yeah, it's a really challenging situation. And I think each story, each film has its own path. But yeah, I think the funding thing is the most challenging part of doing a film, for sure.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's what a lot of filmmakers try to balance and have difficulty dealing with, you know, having a job and making films, having like a 9 to 5 sort of job, and you know, not having enough time to make the film when, you know, when the job is over, and accepting that the thing that you want to do the most is not what you're actually capable of doing right in the moment. You don't have necessarily have the resources for it, so you really have to like, you know, cut corners, make compromises, and use like different resources. And as you said, like collaboration is one of the best resources that you have
Yeah,
to make a film, because you definitely can do more with someone else or with a couple of other people than you might be able to do on your own.
yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes we can either use that you know, as, I mean, it's something against us, because it's expensive to make films, especially if we're looking for this quality and, you know, all these details. But we could also use that in our advantage, you know, to use those limitations as a creative solution also, you know. If you have really like, if you have these limitations of resources and production means, maybe think your film through that, you know, what is possible then and to do through that. I made recently a short film that actually just got good news about being able to premiere soon. We'll be really glad to share with you afterwards.
Oh, nice.
And I mean, I did it, you know, what I had, but it had a really what was I trying to say in this film? It was really easy to adapt it to a really independent production. So basically, it's a correspondence that I'm doing with a Brazilian friend, Fernanda Pessoa, which is also it's an amazing filmmaker. I'm really a fan of her. And we just exchanged some correspondence, you know, and we had a really clear research of what we wanted to be influenced by, which were only female filmmakers. But we didn't have the means. I mean, we wanted to shot in film, for instance. But, you know, film is even more expensive and it's way more complicated. And it was in the middle of pandemic when we made this short film. So what do we do? Well, what we do is we use what we have, you know, the little camera that I have and even a cell phone, and try to make this, you know, narrative and put this filters and, you know, try to fix it in post-production somehow. And in a way, with all these limitations, we were able to send a message. We were able to tell the story, and someone actually heard it and liked it. So yeah, sometimes use those limitations as a creative way of, or as a creative tool for you to tell a story. That can be something, maybe that's sometimes is the only way.
I think
to
that's
actually,
yeah, that's an excellent message. I have a question for you. What is the craziest thing that's happened to you while making films? Like, off the top of your head, is there anything that you can think of while you were filming any of those films that happened that was like, you know, just a bit out of this world, a little bit crazy, bizarre?
You know what? I just thought about this films, and all of them were a really intense process. I mean, it's hard to say like a one crazy moment, because all of them had a really intense strike on me. Because yeah, like in the first film, like I lost a friend, and in the second, you know, like with La Flaca, we were in, I think that can be something that can be something related to a crazy thing, because we had a script for La Flaca based on what Arely told us, you know, about what she planned to do as a celebration for the Santa Muerte anniversary, and, you know, all the threats that she received, that how big of a struggle it was for her to like keep doing that year to year as a promise that she made for the Santa. And she really suffers a lot of threats from other people, you know, whether they're people from other communities, people from other religions, people who are transphobic. So she's a person that she's really hard to trust in other people, even though she leaders a community. So that's really a curious, controversial thing, but those things really happen to her. But anyway, we wrote our script based on that, and we show it to her, and she said like, yeah, this is what really happens to me. So it feels so true, you know, it feels like it's just my day by day. So while we were shooting that, I remember that in the first anniversary that we shot, we had this really skeleton crew, but they were all like mostly Mexican, so it was really easy to work with. It was really nice. And suddenly something felt off. Like Arely was kind of off in those moments, and we had these specific scenes, and she would tell me, you know what, I cannot do it. You don't know what's happening. You won't understand, but I can do it. So we had these difficult moments with her doing the filming, and you know, I ended up saying to Thiago, like, you know what, we won't do it. We won't have those scenes. So let's see what we have in the editing room. And we were living in Brazil at the moment, so we had to go back to Brazil from New York, you know, and we were like seeing the materials, like it's not working. It's not working with what we had. So we had to go back a year after. But we were able to talk to her, and we understood we met her afterwards, and she kind of like told us what happened. And what happened is what we wrote in the script kind of like happened in the real life. So she had like when the film that she said that she had a call, that someone called her and said that she actually got that call. And that voiceover in the film, it was just an interview that we went to her place and like asked her like, what happened that day that you were like that and we couldn't like film the film. So the crazy thing about maybe that film is that fiction and reality got mixed up. I always say that when people like really ask me what happened or why we went the other year to film. So we ended up putting that in the film, you know, we ended up putting like a real conversation that she had about having that threat to the fictional plot of the film. So we like mix it all. And I think that was the craziest thing because we didn't expect it. And somehow we thought that putting that in the film and filming her in the second year of the university, the year after, we thought it was the more faithful way of telling that story, you know, like just let's put it out there. Even if it's not understandable, even if it's kind of like weird in a way.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a really clear film. I think people and watching the film with a doubt, like, is it really documentary? Is it really fiction? And I think that's really valuable. I think it's nice to leave with questions, not like just put it all out there. Each of its own can make their own interpretation. I think that was the craziest maybe thing to like actually like just go for it and leave it like that for the film. So yeah, that was kind of
crazy. I have one last question for you before we leave. If you were, what is the one thing, here's another one thing. What's the one thing that, since you started, your journey as a filmmaker, that you've learned, that you feel like, I wish I knew this before, and this is one thing that I would tell other filmmakers, up and coming filmmakers, like definitely you want to do this or not do this or pay attention to this?
Mm-hmm. So much things. I think I'm still learning, and I think I'll keep learning through the films that I'll the courage to make. But what I would say, like the thing that I learned the most is never rush it. Like never rush a film for any reason, like for a premiere or because you want to enter in at the festival and you're sending just like a rough cut or something just because maybe that's the premiere you want. I think that I learned because of a personal experience of this feature film that I made before, it's just, respect the timing of your story, respect the timing of your film. Like if it's not clear, if you don't feel like it, I know that sometimes we have to make a decision to like, it's this, like it's enough. The film needs to like end, in the editing room or whatever. But what I learned the most is like, let the film also tell like, yeah, this is done, and now you can look for where it can premiere. Because sometimes we rush it, and sometimes we make a film thinking of other elements like the industry or film festivals or where I'm going to premiere, and sometimes that doesn't matter. What matters the most, I mean, it does matter, but I think what matters firstly is that your story is being told as you need and as you wish to say it. And rushing the process sometimes can be backfire to you. Yeah.
I think that is a beautiful message, and it definitely speaks to me because I have a tendency sometimes to do that.
Yeah.
As maybe because as a producer, I'm like, when is it ready? When is it ready? And Stephanie, who's the director, she's like, slow down. Like it needs to take the time that it needs to take. Or I'm always, questioning, like wondering, like, can we do this now? Why isn't it ready now? And she's more like, there's a reason why this isn't ready yet. So like, give it some time, okay? Let me think, give me the headspace, all of this. So thank you for that. Adriana, it was so lovely to talk with you. You're an amazing person. I'm really happy to have connected with you.
Me too, I love
hearing about your shorts, the one that you just got the response to.
Yes.
Of course, I'm looking forward to seeing Issue, like really looking forward to seeing this film. So thank you so much for joining me and talking with me.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It was a pleasure to meet you also. And I look forward to connect, yes, we need to be connected to the Caribbean as well, and filmmakers and your films. So I just wish we could be closer, to share these films and share the stories even closer. But thank you so much. It was great to like have this moment with you. It was great.
Well, as a friend from Trinidad told me just a couple of days ago, we are connected in spirit. So I think once we've made this initial connection, then the bond is
the rest is easier. Yes, it'll come forward somehow.
Yeah. So thank you once again.
Thank you also.